The marble floors of Knight Industries' 42nd floor gleamed under crystal chandeliers, reflecting the power and prestige that Adrian Knight had built over 15 years. His corner office commanded a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline, where glass towers pierced the clouds like monuments to ambition. Yet for all his success, Adrian moved through his empire with the cold efficiency of a machine. His steel-gray eyes focusing only on profit margins and quarterly reports. Sophie Chen had occupied the same desk outside his office for 3 years, her fingers dancing across keyboards with quiet precision. She arrived each morning at 7:30 sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, her wardrobe consisting of modest blouses and pencil skirts in muted tones. To Adrian, she was merely part of the office furniture, liable, unremarkable, invisible. Miss Chen, reschedule the Tokyo conference call, Adrian would command without lifting his eyes from his documents. Sophie would nod silently, her hands already reaching for the phone. She had perfected the art of anticipating his needs, moving through his world without leaving a trace. The other executives barely acknowledged her existence. During board meetings, she would sit in the corner taking notes, her presence so subtle that conversations flowed around her as if she were a ghost. Adrian's business partners knew her only as the secretary, the woman who brought coffee without being asked and ensured every detail ran seamlessly. But beneath Sophie's quiet exterior burned a fierce determination. While Adrian saw only efficiency, Sophie harbored dreams that stretched far beyond these mahogany walls. Each evening she would clear her desk methodically, file away the day's correspondence, and lock away her aspirations until tomorrow. Her salary, modest by Knight Industries standards, represented everything to her: security, hope, and the promise of a better future. As autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson, demanding schedule, she knew his coffee preferences better than his own assistant chef could predict his moods from the set of his shoulders, and had memorized every contact in his extensive network. Yet Adrian Knight, the man who could recite market fluctuations from memory, couldn't remember the color of her eyes. The irony wasn't lost on Sophie. She facilitated his every success, smoothed his every interaction, and ensured his world operated with clockwork precision. But to the CEO, who commanded respect from presidents and prime ministers, Sophie Chen remained beautifully, tragically invisible, a truth that would change forever on one stormy November evening. November's chill had settled over Manhattan like a gray shroud, and storm clouds gathered ominously above the city's towering spires. Sophie glanced at her watch. 9:30 p.m. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving only the soft hum of computers and the distant rumble of thunder to keep her company. Her eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, and her shoulders ached from hunching over quarterly reports that demanded perfection. Adrian had departed for a dinner meeting with Japanese investors, leaving behind a mountain of documents that needed organizing before the morning's presentation. Sophie had volunteered to stay, partly from dedication, and partly because the overtime pay meant she could afford Emma's piano lessons for another month. Younger sister's dreams mattered more than her own exhaustion. The first drops of rain began tapping against the floor-to-ceiling windows as Sophie reached for another stack of contracts. The numbers blurred together, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. She hadn't eaten since her hurried lunch break 6 hours ago, a habit she'd developed to save money and time. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to focus on the financial projections. Thunder crashed overhead and the office lights flickered momentarily. Sophie pressed her palms against the desk, steadying herself as another wave of weakness coursed through her body. The room seemed to tilt, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She needed to finish this work, needed to prove her worth, needed to miss Chen. What are you still doing here? Adrian's voice cut through her haze like a lifeline. He stood in the doorway, his usually immaculate suit slightly damp from the storm, his dark hair tousled by the wind. His steel-gray eyes, which had never truly seen her before, now focused with startling intensity on her pale face. The Tokyo reports, Mr. Knight? You needed them. By Sophie attempted to stand, but her legs betrayed her. She swayed dangerously, her hand clutching the desk's edge as the world spun around her in 3 swift strides. Adrian crossed the room and caught her before she could fall. His strong arms encircled her waist, and for the first time in 3 years, Sophie found herself close enough to see the flecks of silver in his eyes, to catch the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with rain. "When did you last eat?" His voice carried an unfamiliar gentleness that made Sophie's heart skip unexpectedly. "I'm fine, really, just tired." But even as she spoke, her body betrayed her words. Leaning unconsciously into his strength, Adrian's jaw tightened with something that looked remarkably like concern and expression Sophie had never seen him wear. "You're not driving yourself anywhere in this condition." Adrian's tone brooked no argument as he helped Sophie gather her belongings with surprisingly gentle hands. "I'm taking you home." Sophie wanted to protest, to maintain the professional distance that had defined their relationship for 3 years, but another wave of dizziness made her grateful for his steady presence. "Mr. Knight, you don't have to, Adrian," he corrected, softly wrapping her coat around her shoulders with careful attention. "And I absolutely do have to. What kind of man would I be if I let you collapse on my watch?" The elevator ride to the parking garage passed in comfortable silence, save for the storm raging outside. Sophie became acutely aware of everything about him, the way he loosened his tie, with one hand while keeping a protective arm near her elbow, how his jaw had softened from its usual harsh angles, the concern that flickered in his eyes each time he glanced her way. His Bentley smelled of leather and subtle cologne, its interior a cocoon of warmth against the storm's fury. As Adrian navigated through rain-slicked streets, Sophie found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his nose, the concentration furrowing his brow. Hands that commanded boardrooms now handling the steering wheel with surprising tenderness. "Live in Queens," Sophie said quietly, suddenly embarrassed by the distance. "Astoria. You really don't have to, Sophie." The sound of her first name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Where you live doesn't matter." "Matters is getting you home safely." They drove through increasingly modest neighborhoods, the gleaming towers of Manhattan giving way to small apartment buildings and corner bodegas. Sophie directed him through narrow streets lined with parked cars and flickering streetlights, each turn taking them further from his world of luxury and power. When they finally stopped in front of a weathered brick building with a crooked fire escape, Sophie expected to see judgment in his eyes. Instead, Adrian studied the building with curious interest, as if seeing her world had made her suddenly more real to him. "Thank you," she whispered, her hand on the door handle. "Wait." Adrian's voice stopped her. "Sophie, why were you working so late, really?" Something in his tone, vulnerable, almost hesitant, made her turn to face him fully. In the dim glow of streetlights, his features had softened into someone almost unrecognizable from the cold CEO she'd known. This was Adrian Knight, stripped of his armor, genuinely concerned about her well-being. "The reports were important," she said simply. "More important than your health?" "More important than eating dinner?" For a moment the space between them hummed with unspoken understanding. "Sophie, wait." "Aha." Adrian's voice carried a note she'd never heard before, almost pleading. "Let me walk you up. You're still unsteady." Before she could protest, he was out of the car and opening her door, his jacket already darkening with rain. They hurried through the building's entrance, past mailboxes bearing names and faded labels and walls that had seen better decades. Adrian said nothing about the peeling paint or the flickering hallway light. His attention focused solely on ensuring Sophie's safety up 3 flights of narrow stairs. At her door, Sophie fumbled for her keys, acutely aware of Adrian's presence in the cramped hallway. "Thank you again, Mr. Knight." "Adrian, I'll be fine from here." "Sophie, is that you?" a young voice called from inside the apartment, followed by quick footsteps. The door swung open to reveal a girl of about 15, her dark hair in braids, wearing pajamas decorated with musical notes. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the tall, imposing figure standing beside her sister. I'm sorry I'm so late." The storm, Sophie began, but Emma's attention was fixed on Adrian with teenager curiosity. "You must be Sophie's boss," Emma said with the confident directness of youth. "She talks about work all the time." "I'm Emma, her sister." Adrian's expression underwent a remarkable transformation. His corporate mask slipped away entirely as he smiled at Emma. Genuine warm smile that Sophie had never seen him use. "Adrian Knight. It's very nice to meet you, Emma." Night Industries, right? Sophie showed me the building once. It's super tall. Emma beamed back at him. Come in out of the rain. Sophie, you look terrible. Did you eat dinner? I was just finishing some reports, Sophie started. But Emma was already ushering them both inside. The apartment was small, but immaculately clean, every surface carefully maintained, despite the obviously second-hand furniture. Sheet music was scattered across a tiny table near the window, and school textbooks were stacked neatly on a desk that clearly served multiple purposes. What struck Adrian most was the warmth family photos covered one wall, showing Sophie and Emma through the years, their smiles bright against the modest surroundings. Sophie works too hard, Emma confided to Adrian as she bustled toward the kitchen. She thinks I don't notice, but she skips meals to save money for my stuff. It's piano lessons, school supplies, my college fund. Emma's voice carried a mixture of gratitude and worry that made Adrian's chest tighten unexpectedly. Sophie's face flushed crimson. Emma, Mr. Knight doesn't need to. You have a college fund. Adrian interrupted gently, studying Sophie with new eyes. In all his assumptions about his quiet secretary, he'd never imagined this a young woman sacrificing everything for her sister's dreams. Sophie's been saving since our parents died 5 years ago, Emma continued, oblivious to her sister's mortification. She dropped out of Columbia to take care of me, said my education was more important than hers. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow. The revelation settled over Adrian like a storm's clearing, leaving everything he thought he knew about Sophie. Chen shattered on her small apartment floor. Columbia, she'd attended. Columbia University, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country, and had given it all up to care for a 10-year-old sister. Emma, Sophie's voice carried a warning, but her sister continued with the unstoppable honesty of youth. She was studying business administration, had a full scholarship and everything. But when our parents died in the car accident, someone had to take care of me, and Sophie never even hesitated. Emma's eyes shone with fierce pride. She's the strongest person I know. Adrian watched Sophie's face, saw the way she wrapped her arms around herself as if protecting against exposure. For 3 years, this remarkable woman had sat outside his office, quietly brilliant, sacrificing her own dreams while he dismissed her as forgettable. You were at Columbia, he said softly, the words almost an accusation against himself. That was a long time ago. Sophie's voice barely rose above a whisper. It doesn't matter now. It matters, Adrian said with sudden fierce conviction. Sophie, it matters more than you know. Emma, sensing the charged atmosphere, tactfully retreated to her room, claiming homework. But Adrian heard the soft sound of piano music drifting through the thin walls, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, played with the skill that only came from true talent and expensive lessons. Why didn't you tell me? Adrian asked, settling onto her worn couch as naturally as if he belonged there. Sophie remained standing, her hands twisted together. Tell you what? That I'm not actually qualified to be your secretary? That every day I sit outside your office, I'm thinking about financial strategies and market analysis instead of just scheduling meetings. That you're brilliant, he said simply. That you're sacrificing everything for someone you love. That your time... He paused, searching for words adequate to the woman he was finally seeing clearly. That you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Sophie's laugh held no humor. I'm a secretary who nearly fainted at her desk because she forgot to eat dinner. No. Adrian rose, crossing the small space between them. You're a woman who works 18-hour days to give her sister piano lessons, who dropped out of an Ivy League school without a second thought, because love mattered more than prestige. Who's been invisible to me for 3 years because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. When Sophie finally met his eyes, Adrian saw everything he'd missed: intelligence, strength, sacrifice, and something else that made his heart race: hope. Sophie, he said her name like a prayer. I don't know how I never saw you before tonight, but I see you now. And I want to know everything: your dreams, your fears, what makes you laugh, what keeps you awake at night worrying about Emma's future. The storm outside had quieted, but inside Sophie's small apartment, something infinitely more powerful was just beginning. There's something else, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Something I've never told anyone at the office. She moved to the small desk where Emma's textbooks lay scattered, pulling out a worn leather portfolio from beneath them. I've been working on business proposals, market analyses for Knight Industries. Ideas I've developed watching the company for 3 years. Adrian's breath caught as she handed him the portfolio. Inside were dozens of meticulously crafted documents, expansion strategies, cost reduction plans, innovative marketing approaches. Each page bore Sophie's elegant handwriting alongside detailed financial projections and market research that rivaled anything his executive team produced. Sophie, these are... He flipped through pages of pure brilliance, strategies that could revolutionize entire departments. These ideas could transform the company. Why didn't you? Because I'm just a secretary, she said, the words heavy with years of suppressed ambition. Who would listen to the invisible woman who brings coffee and takes notes? Adrian set the portfolio down carefully, his hands shaking slightly as the full magnitude of what he'd overlooked crashed over him. Sophie Chen, he said, his voice rough with emotion, you're not invisible anymore. Not to me. And tomorrow morning, you're not going to be my secretary. Her eyes widened in alarm. Are you firing me? Because if this is about the reports, or staying late, or I'm promoting you, it interrupted, stepping closer until he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. VP of Strategic Development, your own office, your own team, the salary you deserve. These ideas, he gestured to the portfolio, they're going to change everything. Sophie stared at him, tears gathering in her eyes. Adrian, I can't. Accept that just because you feel sorry for, this isn't pity. He said fiercely, his hand reaching up to cup her face with infinite tenderness. This is recognition. This is me finally seeing the brilliant, extraordinary woman who's been saving my company from the shadows for 3 years. This is me falling in love with someone I was too blind to notice until tonight. The confession hung between them like a bridge across years of missed opportunities, and when Sophie smiled through her tears, Adrian knew that stormy evening had changed both their lives forever.